Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey there, and welcome back to Joe on Joe Illustrated. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is an Election Day special. I am recording this the morning of Election Day, November 3rd. When you hear this, the Election Day will be over. I hope everyone within earshot has voted, and specifically, I hope you voted to make some changes in this country, but as long as you voted, that makes me very happy. Today is G.I. Joe number 60. Which is a massive issue. This is the Todd McFarlane issue. Now, it's not the G.I. Joe special. We're going to cover that in a few episodes. But this is the actual Todd McFarlane issue that got published way back in June of 1987. And before we take a look at what comic books were on the rack in June of 1987, I'm going to entreat all of you to please listen to Movies and a Meal podcast. It's a fabulous podcast where Ben Penserga and friends gather each week to have a meal and discuss some movies that they watched. And they're always fun. They actually don't do themes usually. They're usually really wildly different movies like Deadpool and Gone with the Wind and House of a Thousand Corpses, like all in the same movie. Like it's just totally random. Everyone brings something new to the table each week, and it makes it really, really interesting and really, really fun. I enjoy that show quite a bit. They're great sponsors of Joe on Joe. So thank you guys. Movies and a Meal. Make sure everyone goes over there and listens to them. G.I. Joe 60 came out in June of 1987, and so Stalker always asks,
You were saying?
and let's see what was on the shelves of DC Comics. Now, Batman 408, this is the Jason Todd introduction. Jason Todd, who is currently known as the Red Hood, he had been introduced in Batman comics a few years earlier. And when they first introduced Jason, he was really absolutely a Dick Grayson clone. He was, a young circus kid who got orphaned. But they realized that they wanted to change that up. They wanted to differentiate him. And so they took the opportunity of Crisis to kind of give it a soft reboot. And for the next 3 issues, they retell the origin. So this is the infamous or famous Jason Todd steals the tires off the Batmobile. Actually, the hubcaps, I believe. I don't think it was all full tires, but he steals them off the Batmobile. And Batman is so impressed by this plucky gangster that he takes him under his wing. Jason, they also specifically wrote with a bad attitude. You know, he was, again, in an effort to differentiate him from Dick Grayson. And, as we'll find out in a few years from now, they went a little too far because the fans hated it and they voted to kill him. But if you're a fan of the Red Hood, he's one of the most popular Bat characters the last few years, this is where it happened. So Batman 408. Over in Detectives number 575, Detective Comics number 575, rather, it is year 2, number 1. So remember, we just wrapped up year 1. And so they jumped right over into year 2 in the detective book. And this was Alan Davis on the art. And this cover is infamous. Again, another infamy in the Batman series, because Alan Davis drew a gun on the front cover, and they apparently in the editorial room, they wanted a different style of gun. The details of which pistol eludes me, but Alan Davis drew one gun. They wanted a different gun. So they just had another artist in-house redraw it for production. So when Alan Davis saw his finished piece without his rendering of the pistol, he was very upset and very quick to quit the books. So he did so. And that's why Todd McFarlane takes over, which ties into our issue of G.I. Joe today. So Todd McFarlane took over Detective for a couple issues after Alan Davis left because of the gun on the cover of this comic book. If you've never read year 2, it's really, really good. It is a really great starting point for Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which is probably the best Batman movie, animated or live action, that they've ever done. So if you love Batman Mask of the Phantasm, I urge you to read Batman Year 2. It's often overlooked, I think. It's got a lot of melodrama, and like any kind of sequel to something great, which Year 1 is amazing, it's not really as impactful because it introduced the idea of the Reaper, who's very much like the Phantasm. And it gives Bruce an early love interest and all this stuff. So it fills in a bunch of backstory, but it's not that seminal Bat break through the window and I got to punish criminals kind of origin. It's more of a, what did he do next? Which never really resonates as much with people. But it's really fabulous. I love it. And Alan Davis's art is great. And McFarlane's art is really good on it too. Although I do wish Alan had finished it out because there's nothing smoother than Alan Davis art. Also on the stands this week, Flash #1. This is the first issue #1 for any Flash. If you know the Barry Allen Flash, he started over in Showcase, and when he moved over to his own book, he never had his own issue #1. So this is really cool, and this is the Wally West version. After the Crisis, Barry had died in it, and Wally had his costume in his arms. But if you remember where Wally was at that time, like from the Teen Titans stuff, his powers were fading, so he wasn't really up to full speed, so to speak. So this William Eisner Loeb's Flash book, and I think it's Jackson Geis on the art, picks up from there. And Wally's fast, but he's not super, super fast, and he gets tired really quick and everything. So he's got to work through some of those speed powers. But this is the start of Wally West being, in my opinion, the best modern age Flash. And he was the Flash for 87, for 30 years. And really, well, no, 20 years, I guess. 87, yeah, 20 years. And for my money, the best modern day Flash. I think all the stuff that people like about Barry now, all the good stuff, they kind of took it from Wally. So, bring back Wally West, guys, because he's pretty fantastic. And over in Action Comics, Superman's crossing over with the Green Lanterns. Booster Gold is having a crossover with Hawk, and I don't know if Dove's in it, but Hawk and Cheshire from the Teen Titans. The Spectre's having a good month. He's both, it's issue 3 of his miniseries, or his regular series, the Mike Kaluta one, and is also in the Secret Origins this month, Secret Origins number 15. So that's it for DC Comics.
You were saying?
In Uncanny X-Men 218, it's got a sweet Art Adams cover. Art Adams was pretty new on the scene at the time, and they've introduced Longshot to the team. This is that era, like it's about a year's worth of X-Men stories, post-Mutant Massacre and pre-Fall of the Mutants, where it's kind of like not much happens. I mean, a lot of stuff happens if you read it, but it's always forgotten. And they were right about to burst, like Silvestri was about to come on the title. Or actually, well, he was on it now at this point, but like he was about to explode on it. It was another year or so before Jim Lee would come on the book. And when like Fall of the Mutants came, that was the big change of their status quo. So the issues between the Morlock Massacre and when they faked their death in Dallas, those issues are prevalent in dollar bins and cheap. Like I always see those issues at the comic shop. So they're always overlooked, but they're really, really good. And a lot of cool stuff, Dazzler joins or rejoins, however you want to look at it. I guess joins for the first time. Psylocke joins the team. Longshot. It's kind of like they were forming what this new iteration of the team would look like, and maybe that's why it's not as well received, because Claremont kind of needed to figure out how they all gelled together. And Rogue was taking a leadership spot, things like that. So X-Men 218 on the cover with Dazzler, Longshot, Psylocke, pre-Ninja Psylocke, of course, and Rogue, done by the beautiful, wonderful Art Adams. Thor 380, Walter Simonson. This is an amazing issue. It's just Thor versus Jormungand, the World Serpent, guys. And if you know the Norse mythology behind it, Thor is destined to die in battle with the World Serpent, and that's one of the triggers of Ragnarok. Simonson had been teasing this and leading up to this for a good long time. Thor was cursed with the inability to die, but his bones were brittle, so he was wearing a suit of armor that would basically it would protect his body, but also just encase his body, because his body was slowly liquefying, to be honest. But he still had to fight, and the World Serpent, which is literally a serpent that wraps around the world, comes to life. And what's great about this book, and I really mean it, Thor 380, seek it out. It should be really cheap. It should be $3-4 in your back issue at your comic shop. Thor 380 is all splash pages, and it's all Simonson splash pages, so everything is epic and big, and it is Thor fighting this giant serpent for 22 pages of splash. It's awesome. They would do a similar thing for the death of Superman a few years later, when Superman fought Doomsday, and that final one was splash, 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 double page, triple page, splash page, things like that. Simonson did it here. I'm sure it had been done before that, but this is probably the most recent antecedent that I could think of prior to that Superman book. And it's really dynamite. And spoiler alert, at the end of it, Thor dies, but because he's cursed that he can't die, he is just a puddle, literally a puddle of sentient goo, like energy. It's awesome. It's really great. So check it out, Thor 380. Also on the stands this month is the Marvel graphic novel number 27. It's crazy they had done 27 graphic novels at this point. It's Emperor Doom. It's by David Michelini and Bob Hall. It's a really good book, and one that actually has been referenced a lot in comics, but I don't think a lot of people have read it. I'm sure it's been, I believe it's been collected, not as Emperor Doom itself, but like in the pages of other omnibus or like Avengers collections or things like that. But it's great. It really posits, and it's not a what if story. Like they kept it in continuity. It's got a lot of West Coast Avengers and the East Coast Avengers of what would happen if Doom actually took over. It's enjoyable. It's not flashy. Bob Hall's artwork, he had done, I believe Hall had worked on, top of my head, Squadron Supreme, I believe. He doesn't do flashy art, but he does very strong, solid character work. And it's good. I've only actually recently read this book in the last few years. It was on my radar, but I just had never picked it up. And a couple years back, I finally got it, and I really dug it. It's very enjoyable. Emperor Doom is a really good story. It should get more play and love, especially that new Doctor Doom book. If you guys haven't read it, it's by the guy who Christopher Cantwell, I think, who's the showrunner for *Halt and Catch Fire*. That Doctor Doom book is awesome. And if you're looking for something classic, Emperor Doom is really, really good. It shouldn't be terribly difficult to find. Probably a nice copy is probably $15-20 at the most. But you can get a reader copy for under 10. I'm positive you can. So check that out. That also was on the stands in June of 1987. And so that's it for Marvel Comics.
You were saying?
Now, we also like to take a look at the movie theater. And in June of 1987, there's a couple classics that were in the movie theater. So place your head here. On June 5th, Harry and the Hendersons, guys, with John Lithgow and his family, who they take in Kevin Peter Hall, who is playing Sasquatch, and it's great. It's such a delightful movie. I haven't seen it in quite a few years, but it's what's there not to love about Harry and the Hendersons? It's awesome, and it's just such a great touch point for references and jokes and stuff. But the same day as Harry and the Hendersons, The Untouchables, Brian De Palma's Untouchables came out. This is a classic. Kevin Costner, Andy Garcia, De Niro, Sean Connery, he just passed, rest in peace, Patricia Clarkson, David Mamet did the screenplay, De Palma directed. The Untouchables is really, really good, and it stands up. And as a Chicago guy, I used to live right around where they filmed it. I wasn't living there when they filmed it, but that corner bar that explodes, that's still a bar last time I checked. All that stuff is great, and it's really in the neighborhood, really feels Chicago, and just such a great, great movie. 7 days later, The Only Thing That Matters. Oh, no, not really, because there's two really good movies, so we'll knock this one out of the way. The Witches of Eastwick. A great movie. Nicholson, Cher, Susan Sarandon, Michelle Pfeiffer. It's a really, really great movie. I just saw that I believe it's on HBO Max right now, streaming. If you've never seen it, check it out. George Miller, Mad Max fame, directed it. So well done. It's so funny, bitingly funny. It's not for kids, certainly, but it's really, really solid. But the big movie for June 12th is Predator, guys. John McTiernan's Predator, Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, Bill Duke, Jesse Ventura, Shane Black, Sonny Landham. Come on, everything good comes from Predator. We know this. The movie's never been topped. Shane Black tried to capture that vibe in The Predator, and it just didn't. It just wasn't the same. Go back to the source, guys. Predator is always amazing. On the 19th, the movie Roxanne came out with Steve Martin and Daryl Hannah, where Steve Martin had that really long nose, and it was Cyrano de Bergerac. That's a delightful movie. And then the next week, guys, we're dealing with Dragnet and Spaceballs open on the same weekend. Could you imagine that? Dragnet was a huge tentpole movie for them. They put a ton behind it. It was okay. It holds up, actually. It's got Jack O'Halloran, Superman's non. But Spaceballs was a huge movie. Mel Brooks comedy with Bill Pullman, Rick Moranis, John Candy, Mel Brooks, Daphne Zuniga, Dick Van Patten, Joan Rivers. Come on. Spaceballs and Dragnet came out on the same day. Could you imagine that happening today? That would never happen today. Absolutely fabulous. So June was a strong, good, really good month for movies. June of 1987. And now let's get into G.I. Joe number 60.
You are my slave, Duke.
G.I. Joe number 60 with a cover by Mike Zeck and Joseph Rubinstein. Now, this is that classic cover where General Hawk is half submerged into the water on the beach, and Zanzibar is flying on his skiff above him, shooting a rocket out of a, it's funny. It looks like he's using one of Fast Draw's rocket-propelled launchers to shoot at General Hawk. But it's pretty fun. It's pretty iconic. It's got that deep red background, the green surf, his camo kind of blending into that. It's solid. It does the job. I think it looks great. It's funny. It outside of the Zek face, and I think that like the hands, it's kind of the least Zeki G.I. Joe cover that I can think of. Just one of the least Zeki covers. I don't know what that means, but placement and everything about it doesn't scream classic Zek. But I like it. That is not a denigration of it. I like it a lot.
Yo, Joe!
Cross Purposes, written by Larry Hama, penciled by Todd McFarlane. Andy Mushinski on inks, Bob Sharon coloring, Joe Rosen lettering, Bob Harris editor, Jim Shooter editor-in-chief. So this is the big McFarlane debut, guys. We are outside of an airport, specifically the Newark Airport in New Jersey. And a gentleman with his back to us. Now, we know that it's Law from Law & Order, but he's got his back to us in this scene. He's on a walkie-talkie, not too inconspicuous at all, talking to someone else on a walkie-talkie 5 feet away from him. It's not a poorly rendered scene by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just funny. They've got, especially, he's talking to Falcon. Actually, Falcon's in a Jeep. He's not in a vamp or anything, but an actual traditional army Jeep. Falcon's like the antennas on these walkie-talkies are massive, and they are maybe 10 feet away from each other, closer to 5 feet. So that's pretty entertaining. Also, if they're trying to be somehow in disguise, or in like inconspicuous, they are not achieving that because they're both in their full normal outfits, which are like military grade stuff in a military Jeep. Yeah, it's funny. But what it is Law and Order are approaching someone in a general's dress uniform with his back to him, and it says someone with unless there's another brigadier general following him, and we have Falcon identify him as Hawk.
Yo, Joe!
Now this is where we get into that classic, like I feel like it happened in 80s action movies a lot. That trope of when someone gets off a plane or a bus or any kind of mass transit, someone walks up to them and just kind of wraps their arms around them and smooth talks them into the Jeep or the van or the bus or whatever it is they're trying to kidnap somebody. That's what's happening here. So Law kind of sidles up to General Hawk, and Order is quite vocal in his instructions that Hawk follow with them. And he says, Hawk says, if I don't do it, Law won't do a thing, but the dog will tear his throat out. And he said, you said it, sir, not me. And so they get into this Jeep with Falcon. They drive to what says New Lincoln. And I think in the notes for the IDW hardcover here, I think it says that sign, while appropriate, is actually going the wrong direction. Like they wouldn't be going that way. I don't know my New York, geography all that well, so I'm not here to comment on that. But I like that they tried. I like that they, put it. Now, we get a lot of early McFarlane's here. You remember the big smiles McFarlane put on everybody? I don't know, he may still do that, but like Venom, that early Venom smile, that's what Law is rocking here. You see his mouth shapes, very like downturned mouths. You see a lot of that on these early pages. Definitely, it's proto McFarlane. It's proto Spider McFarlane, and it's good. It's solid. I dig it. We are going to do the Spider-Man special, the G.I. Joe special, where they got the Scott Koblish cover of Snake Eyes as Spider-Man. That'll come up in a few episodes. We're going to cover that to see. Apparently McFarlane went off the rails on an issue and they didn't like it, but we're not there yet. But for now, I think he does a pretty good job overall with this issue. Fully solid stuff. But it is, I have to say, it is different. It is absolutely more comic booky and more than Image 90s than G.I. Joe was really used to. You guys follow this show and you guys have read all these comics. G.I. Joe was always a very grounded art style, and this is definitely tipping into the world of comic books, and superheroes, which I appreciate. He doesn't do a ton of wild boxes, panels and stuff, so that's good, and I think that's a good constraint to put on him for this stuff. And overall, he does a lot of backgrounds, which is really great, because backgrounds are things that a lot of those Image guys stopped doing after a while, or they weren't really great to work on it in the first place. And Todd does a really great job with it in this.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, in the New Jersey marshes, like, we can't have a good New Jersey adventure without bringing the Dreadnoks, right? So Zorana and Buzzer, they pull up. Buzzer's on his motorcycle, and Zorana's on that Dreadnought trike, which was a toy. And they see that somebody is siphoning the gas from Dreadnoks, from the Dreadnought outpost, Zartan's outpost. It's funny, Zorana was coming to steal the tank of gas, and someone else is beating him to it. That's pretty funny.
Yo, Joe!
And here we meet for the first time Zanzibar and Monkeywrench. Say what you will about Zanzibar. He's a pirate. Pirates fit into Dreadnoks. He's a little silly looking, but I've always been here for Monkeywrench. I think Monkeywrench is awesome. I think he absolutely fits right in with that early Dreadnought crew. I think he would have made a perfect first Dreadnought. I don't think he gets the love he deserves. He's fantastic. So we get introduced to them for the first time, and sure enough, they're stealing their bad gas. They had sold bad gas to Zartan, and now they're stealing it back to then sell it to someone else, which, it's a typical Dreadnought maneuver. I get it. And Buzzer and Zorana run up on them and start thrashing them, punching them, knocking them out, beating them up and stuff. Zorana does a really good job. She more than holds her own. She absolutely wipes the floor with Zanzibar. Monkeywrench and Buzzer are kind of hidden by the word balloons in Zorana's panel, but it does look like Buzzer's giving him the once over. The fight stops because they're going to make a deal, but as it goes, it's nice. I like the backgrounds. I like the scenery. I like the placement. Not to bring up an obvious parallel stuff, but look at the locales and the destination and like the setting details that Todd was putting into these books then, compared to something like we're getting today, Dead Game, which I think, Liefeld and McFarlane are very, I don't say similar styles, but come on, they're both the Image. They come from the same school. You guys know what I'm saying there. And you see what a difference backgrounds can make, and putting in the details of grounding us in a location. It just feels like you're watching a story unfold instead of just seeing people dance across a blank canvas.
Yo, Joe!
As we get to the Jersey Shore, it is decrepit and beat up. Apparently, so this was a time when the Jersey Shore had not yet been revitalized. So Springsteen was singing about a lot about this shore right now. And what Hawk says, somewhere along the way, he forgot that most people like clean water and warm weather at beach resorts because there's all these fake palm trees. It's called like Miami North, which is pretty entertaining. And it works because we're now introduced to the man of the hour, also in his first appearance, Chuckles. And it's Chuckles in his Hawaiian shirt. He's very squat and beefy. And he looks like an escapee from Hawaii 5-0.
Yo, Joe!
He also looks in this panel like a monster. Like, he is massive in this panel. And we're also introduced to Fastra for the first time. Fastra, who is 100% in uniform, looking like a Centurion more than he looks like a G.I. Joe member. I'm never a fan of that stuff. I always wish they would draw them kind of relaxed, like take the helmet off of Fastra. It's okay to see him without the helmet, but I get it. He has to be in costume. But Chuckles looks massive. Chuckles looks like the last person that could ever possibly go undercover because he's built like a brick house, an absolute brick house. This is where we start to learn what's going on here. So they're confirming that he's General Abernathy, Hawk. And until this morning, Falcon, Chuckles, and Law & Order, and Fastra, they were told that they were already part of the G.I. Joe team. But we've never met him before, and so we don't really understand what's happening here.
Yo, Joe!
Chuckles goes on to explain, he's with Army Intelligence, and some guys came across him a while ago. They were investigating a certain high-ranking government official with ties to extremists within the Pentagon. He uncovered an operation being honchoed by one of our own intelligence types that smelled fishy from the word go. And Hawk kind of baits him, saying, I need to see your ID. And Chuckles replies with, well, any idea I show you is going to be fake, which is then Hawk says, okay, great, because if you were dumb enough to show me your real ID, then he might have a chance to escape. And Chuckles basically convinces him, you're going to want to stick around until you see what they're guarding. Before we go to the next page, the entire actual MacGuffin of this episode, of this issue, is not good. I gotta say, this whole thing really smacks of an episode of the cartoon. It doesn't make a lot of sense on any level whatsoever, other than an excuse to have these brand new characters punch each other in the face. So I'm not in favor of this plot. The execution I'm in favor of. No, the execution's okay, but the plot of this, I feel like it's almost as if Larry like purposely was like, fine, you want me to shoehorn all these new characters in? I'm going to come up with the stupidest plot ever. So these guys were lied to by somebody and told that they needed to guard
Yo, Joe!
a massive, ridiculous looking tri-tipped missile. I don't know if it's nuclear or not, but this giant missile system, they were told to guard it with their lives. And not only is it a missile system that these four guys were duped into guarding under the pretext of being on the G.I. Joe team, but it is on these massive rollers, which if you've ever seen the space shuttle move, it's kind of like that. Like they put it on those big like people mover, like giant building mover things. Supposedly they're supposed to go very, very slow. And it is the most complex looking, ridiculously sized missile you've ever seen. I don't know what instructions Todd was given. He certainly throughout the issue does not adhere to any kind of design sense. There is no continuity from panel to panel of what this missile looks like, how large it is. It changes size, it changes stature, it changes shape. It is, and maybe that was the point, to just be over exaggerating and stupid on it. I don't know, but it is distractingly awkward. And it feels like, and I'm no aerospace expert, but it feels like the fins on this are actually upside down. They're all, I don't know. No, I guess they're shaped more like an airplane wing, but it feels like they should be. If you're looking at it, it's like a 90-degree angle on the top, and I don't know. It just feels off. But the whole missile is ridiculously designed. And we learned from Chuckles that the only problem was none of these guys were really assigned to the Joes. This was a covert operation inside of a covert operation. It's an old solid fuel prototype written off the books years ago. So they lost it, but they lost it inside a fake hotel on the New Jersey Strip. I don't know what's happening.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, we're introduced to two chuckleheads who look pretty funny. Like they're fun, good renderings. It's definitely that McFarlane era where the heads are just a little too big. But they look great. He's rendering them well. Like I'm here for it, but they're always just a little too big for the bodies. That was kind of one of his things back then. So you see that the guy sitting down has just got a great face. I imagine both of them are modeled after someone real, whether like a friend of his or something, or like actual old generals or something like that, because it's really distinctive and really nice looking. They're saying that that Chuckles is onto them, and that he's bringing others into the picture, and so they're going to have to, quote, take care of these guys. I don't understand why. They told him to guard it in the first place. So what's happening here?
Yo, Joe!
So back at Jersey, you see Chuckles points out that the target is actually aimed at Cobra Island. And while he's pointing that out, some ridiculous gambling old lady busts into the main ballroom. And this is the first time you see that the scale on this missile is crazy wrong. Like in this middle panel, it's I like that they're placing it in a location. I'm here for that. I think that's great. But it looks so much smaller now than it did in the previous page, and it doesn't look like it did in the previous page. It is just the worst. It's the worst design missile I've ever seen in a comic like this. It's just not. It's so wrong and out of place. But this old lady is very excited to see what the Joes are at. And then we get a panel that was drawn by Mark Teixeira. And it's so true. It's pointed out in the back, in the notes page from this IDW, by the IDW thing by the brilliant Mark Bellomo, that, yeah, this is totally Mark Teixeira. And I saw that immediately myself. That's absolutely Ghost Rider era Mark Teixeira drawing that panel. I don't know what was there before. I could only imagine. But it is not Todd McFarlane drawing those guys. But then the bottom panel is Zorana ripping her face off, and she's running out of there, and they realize she was in disguise. She didn't really do anything besides see that it was there. But she is running out, and they're running after her. Now, props to this for being 100% ripped out of an episode of the cartoon. This is straight out of stuff that Zorana did do and the Baroness did. I think this was like, is this how she fell in love with Mainframe? Like sneaking in and all that stuff in disguise. And so this part's fun. Doesn't make any sense, but it's fun.
Yo, Joe!
So now outside the hotel, they see other dreadnoks. She gives an order to Buzzer to tell the Cobra consulate in New York that the Joes are going to aim that missile at Cobra Island. A couple of things. Why Buzzer couldn't stop and make a phone call, I don't know. But he's got to hightail it to New York. That makes a ticking clock for the story. That's fun. If you were telling the story today, you would have to explain why he couldn't use his cell phone and get shot or something like that. But back then, I don't know why he couldn't just because no one chases him, if memory serves. He doesn't actually get chased. He just drives really fast and drives terribly. So why couldn't he just stop and call the consulate? But probably because he's illiterate and can't use a phone. So he takes off. And while that happens, the fight starts. And Zorana and Monkeywrench, they pull up on their trike. And so now we get to see the toys in action.
Yo, Joe!
So now, I don't know who launched this, who set this up, but this entire fake building pulls out, and the missile system, which we said was on those tracks, like those earth mover things, starts pulling out of the gantry, right? So it's going to go for a launch. They say the renegade creep in the Pentagon must have activated it by remote. Okay. This bottom panel is pretty cool. It shows some. I like the bubble speed effect on the machine gun in the bottom panel. That's a lot of fun. He also drew Monkeywrench's hair kind of flipping all over the place. That's a good look. Order is carrying Law's gun, although his drawings of Order really are not great. It's ironic because he started on a book called Coyote. But let's go back a panel to this panel here. I see on this building, at least 20 floors on this hotel that open up, and a 20-story missile leaves this hotel. They were in a room. They were not in a room with a 20-story missile. And then in that other panel, that 20-story missile became 30 feet off the ground. Ridiculous on this missile. You could say it's fun. I just say it's a little ridiculous.
Yo, Joe!
Now here we go with Zanzibar and his skiff. This is the toy that haunted children everywhere. I like they name it Zanzibar with the skiff. He's attacking Fast Draw and Hawk. The missile continues to roll out onto the sand. Hawk gives orders to Fast Draw to use his missiles and to take out the big missile and to blow it up. He tells the Joes to get off the gantry. They say there's no other cover, so he can't actually fire. By the time they clear it, Zorana screws up his aim, so that his first missile fires wildly.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, Buzzer is hightailing it into New York City, bouncing all over the tops of cars, just having a good time, changing lanes. It's like Buzzer's adventure is just traffic. That's really all his adventure is. It's not very exciting. It's funny because Buzzer's always great, but it's just bouncing off cars and driving through cars. There's really not a lot to get excited about here. But I'll say this, a really well-rendered look at New York. McFarlane does a great job getting the details on this, the bridge work, and they got the river and the tolls and everything. McFarlane nails this. This looks really good. It's just not really exciting. I don't understand why someone wasn't chasing him. That would have been great.
Yo, Joe!
So the firefight continues. Fast Draw is trying to unplug the sand in his missile launcher. He can't get it working, so they can't stop this missile. I don't know why no one has any grenades or C4 to blow it up. They're standing on the thing they want to blow up, and they can't get the one guy that wants to blow it up to blow it up. So instead, they just keep shooting at the dreadnoks. It's interesting. The bottom panel is proof of having that stationary machine gun at the very front of a vehicle is always awkward, because you see that he can only shoot directly in front of him. So it just, in order to illustrate that, the skiff just has to be in a really awkward place to even try to hit Chuckles. It's weird.
Yo, Joe!
And Chuckles just proceeds to beat the living hell out of Freddie Mercury. He's got a little Freddie Mercury. He's got a little Ryan the Hunter from Legion in him. Zanzibar does. Good, good musculature, like punching stuff here. Not too cartoony from McFarlane. I like the use of these, like the narrow panels in the middle that kind of let us check in on the other action. So you got this large panel with Chuckles and Zanzibar, and you're from a distance. Then you got a little medium shot on to see what Order is doing to Zorana and Monkeywrench on that trike. Order's having this, but it's a real narrow panel. Then you have a wider panel, same size as the first, with Chuckles and Zanzibar. Then second row, same size, wider panel, same medium close-up now, but now Zanzibar gets the upper hand. So it's a nice like change of pace storytelling, action to action. Then we get to another little mini panel to check in on Order and the trike. And then we go back to the same wide panel, the kind of medium wide shot, to see overall where is the skiff in relation to the bike. And if you look in the distance, you see that the fight on the bike has now ended because it looks like Monkeywrench is kicking Order off of the trike. Chuckles seems to have won or is about to win the fight with Zanzibar. Like he's definitely dominating Zanzibar, and the skiff is, crashing into the water. So this is a fun little bit of storytelling. Kind of takes you around the fight with a nice variety of panels, but without getting too wild in the panel design.
Yo, Joe!
This is a very cool shot. Buzzer on his bike, leaning into a turn. It's a good looking draw. It just is. Like he fits the whole figure in frame. It doesn't even take up like the whole top. You could have easily taken up the whole top row with this. He does like, it looks like 2/3 of the top row with just this really sweet Buzzer picture on a motorcycle. And then he gives us a little storytelling action as he buzzes a cop and stuff. And this is all just grist for the We Love Buzzer when he says funny stuff mill, which is so true. He's always been just fun and stupid. And that's what this whole trip is about. It's just there's no one chasing him, so it's not that exciting. Like, pick up the phone. But he's headed towards the consulate building, which, is in New York. And he drives right through the front doors and into an elevator on the bike. I do love that they have Cobra soldiers in their full-on terrorist gear with their guns in the lobby of the consulate. They're not even screwing around.
Yo, Joe!
So the missile's about to launch. The fight's still going on. It's just all action. This giant, massive, weirdly drawn missile is now it's starting to expend. It looks like the docking moorings are falling off. That means it's going to launch. There's smoke everywhere, so it's like getting ready. The exhaust is getting ready. Law yells for cover. It's a good-looking Law yelling for cover. The trike finally flips over, and Chuckles and Zanzibar get flipped with it.
Yo, Joe!
And they collide with the trike, blowing up everyone's vehicle as this weird missile launches into the sky. And they are using a muffler to beat on Chuckles' head. So she's going to Midasize him. That's from an old Midas commercial. I actually remember that myself. But they're beating on Chuckles with a muffler. And as the Joes help Chuckles kind of recover from this missile blast, which knocked everybody out, the Dreadnoks get away. His missile blast, in proportion to the size, a 30-story missile, should have killed everyone involved. But the blast radius on this missile is really quite small. There's just proportion issues that are just troubling.
Yo, Joe!
Now, target acquired, infrared lock on, and we get fire. And a missile comes out of nowhere, and it blows up the bigger missile. And we see that Buzzer is inside of one of those Cobra helicopters. I think it's a Hind, those big transport ones that they never made the toy of. So we're assuming that they launched it. But it looks like one of Fastraw's missiles. I don't know. But they then pick up the Dreadnoks and they're on their way. But it's a fun explosion. The explosion's one of those ones where it's literally all sound effect. Like it just says boom. There's there's very little drawn explosion in there. I kind of like to see the explosions with a little boom on the side, but it works. It totally works. Don't mean to nitpick. The dust in the bottom panel is a lot of fun. It's very animation. It's very animation. It's very light and loose and like quick pen strokes, and it gives that feel of a helicopter rotor kicking everything up below this helicopter. So however they achieve that, fantastic job. I don't know if that's done in the inking or if McFarlane did it himself, but it looks really nice. It looks very cartoony, like Animaniacs kind of cartoons. It works really well to give a lot of life to this one panel that's pretty basic. This by the way, contrary to whatever it was, a dead game, looks like a helicopter flying and picking up people. This is how you do it. And the detail on it is awesome.
Yo, Joe!
So Falcon and Law, they're helping Chuckles. They're picking him up. He's going to be just fine. Kind of dusts himself off. Hawk says, as far as he's concerned, they're all members of the G.I. Joe team. So they all get indoctrinated in. And Chuckles says there's just one itty bitty little matter that has to be cleared up first.
Yo, Joe!
Later that day, or later at the Pentagon, we get a nice establishing shot of the Pentagon, which is great. And Chuckles dressed kind of like, I feel like he's dressed like a priest for some reason. This white suit, so Chuckles, it's very Don Johnson, very Magnum PI. He busts this door down where these two yahoos are hanging out still. And he's like, I'm going to make you pay. And he says, here's a pen to sign your resignations. So I don't know what they were doing with this. They had a missile that nobody wanted, so they were hiding it in an abandoned casino that not only was just an abandoned casino, but it was literally 30 stories of hollowed out building just to hide a weird looking missile that they didn't tell us the missile was anything more special than just a big old missile. Why did it have to look so weird? Who fired it? I'm assuming, so these guys say they fired it, but it was going to go to Cobra Island, which is the enemy of the Joes. So why did the Joes care about stopping it? Because they didn't launch it. It's going to Cobra Island. I guess you don't want to start a fight with someone that, I guess they're not in the mood to start it, but it's still Cobra. And they didn't launch it anyway. So why are they responsible for stopping it? And then Fastra, whose one job is shooting missiles, can't shoot a missile and hit something 10 feet in front of him. And then Buzzer has to drive all the way to New York in order to tell someone to send a helicopter out to Newark to blow up a big missile with a small missile. You see where this just all breaks down into not great. Not a great example of G.I. Joe-dom. I can only imagine that this is something in a reaction to an edict of, you have to introduce these, 6 characters? Yeah, six new characters, plus these vehicles, because it's kind of a hot mess, and I say that coming from the pretty grounded story arc that we had been on, and a pretty grounded story arc that we're going to go into in the next issue. With the guys being captured beyond the enemy lines and all that stuff. So not my favorite, but I will say this, the execution of it, not my favorite, the execution of it's not terrible. McFarlane's art was really good. McFarlane, obviously, is a legend and a talent and stuff. When he gets a little too out there, it's not as appealing to me, but when he was tight and concise like this, I think it brought a lot of energy to a form, especially at the time when not a lot of guys were doing this kind of, not anime, but like animated cartoon version, cartoony comic realism. It's like you're crossing Neil Adams with the G.I. Joe Sunbow cartoon. And that's kind of what you get with this McFarlane stuff. So it's got the brightness and the bigness of the Sunbow cartoon, but with all the, the hatching and all the line work that you would get out of a 70s, 80s, mainstream Marvel comic, which is solid. I really, really dig that. And, there's fun bits throughout this, but the plot of it, MacGuffin, I can't say I'm here for that. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And most of all, I hope everyone exercised their constitutional right and voted. So we shall see you on the other side. And now you, Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.